Hey guys, I'm going to be talking about some pretty heavy subjects for this video, so if you're uncomfortable with any of the following topics, this is your warning to watch another video, because I won't be holding back in this. Okay, on with the show. None of us is who we appear to be at first. Every person you'll ever meet presents a version of themselves to the world that they wish to be seen, a persona that allows them to walk through society accepted. Every morning when we wake up, we slip into a version of ourselves that we feel people will not reject, a watered down facsimile of the real you that hides the parts we do not wish for the world to see. And this disguise of ours changes depending on where we are and who we're with. The person you allow yourself to be around your parents is different to the version of you that you reveal at work, and so on and so forth. And none of these forms is necessarily false. To match the expectations of the different groups and people we interact with, it's necessary to restrict ourselves to what's most appropriate at the time. But each of these is still us, just diluted for palatability. The real you is always there, hidden beneath the mask, waiting with bated breath for the moment that you're able to shrug off another layer of your disguise and reveal a less hindered version of your true self, whatever that may be. Sometimes, however, the masks we wear aren't just used to skirt under the radar, but become integral to our survival. By its very nature, a mask cannot be your true self, but it may sometimes become necessary to allow others to believe it is. Anyone who's lived with homophobic family members can attest to this, to the stifling nature of that mask, how wearing it slowly chokes you until it can feel like there's very little of you left at all. And all masks crack, but sometimes the punishment for that cracking can be so horrendous that as you seal it up, you may start to forget that it was ever something you could take off to begin with. And with survival on the line, why would you? Isn't it better to hide away in that pain, slowly dying inside, but ultimately be safer for it? Who even are we when the mask is removed? And will anyone accept us when they see what lies beneath? And what happens if people never look behind that mask at all? Astarion is a difficult character for me to talk about, partially because, with the possible exception of Shadowheart, who he becomes is more reliant on the player than any other companion in the game, and partially because of the heavy nature of his story. I'm going to be real with you guys, I'm not going to be touching on Astarion's romance in this video. I haven't actually romanced him, partially because he's so not my type that the very thought of even trying to flirt with him makes me laugh, but mostly because, okay, there's no easy way to put this, but I just don't like that Astarion's romance can essentially turn him into an abuser. You can argue over whether or not it's realistic, but the fact of the matter is that I just don't want to deal with that because I don't want to relive the worst relationship of my life, and I'm just uncomfortable talking about the fact that some people will actively push him into becoming the worst version of himself because they have a fetish for I can make him worse type storytelling. I'm sorry if you were hoping for a romance breakdown like I did in the Lae'zel video, but I'm just not feeling up to it. All I have to say is set healthy boundaries, give him emotional support, and don't let him push you around. Alright, we're moving on. I gotta be honest, I did not see what everyone was so obsessed about when I met Astarion in my first playthrough. He was the favourite of some of my friends, half of the internet, and even my then boyfriend, and I just did not see the appeal. He was just another pretty white-haired snark boy from what I could tell, and he did very little to actually stand out in my eyes. I actually swapped him out of the party the moment Will joined up, and I only really brought him back out for important story moments, or if I needed a lockpicked or a trap disarmed. Which I did need. A lot. Way too much, actually. That is too many traps. Put some of those back. It also didn't help that Astarion's personality didn't really sit well with me. For one thing, I'm a very chaotic, good-aligned person, and I like helping people, which meant I was constantly faced with Astarion's disapproval every fucking time I followed my heart and did something remotely nice for anyone. And the other thing is that Astarion has a pretty severe case of resting bitch voice, and this isn't me casting shade on Neil's performance here. I think he does a fantastic job realising the character, and Astarion has some of the funnier lines in the game.
Sweet hells were you thinking? Activating that lot? I was right there! Gods!
But it also means that he has this problem wherein, even when he's being completely sincere and emotionally vulnerable, he still kind of comes off as if he's being sarcastic. So I wasn't exactly chomping at the bit to spend just a little bit more time with him, if you catch my drift. And you know what? I kind of regret that. Just as with Lae'zel, I allowed my first impression of him to rule my decisions regarding him throughout most of my first playthrough, and so I ended up missing a lot. It wasn't until I actually made it through his personal quest in part 3 and got to his "oh, that's why you're like this" moment that I suddenly realised just how much I'd missed, and this prompted me to do a much more thorough examination my second playthrough. And boy fucking howdy did I come away from that with some thoughts. Astarion is the rogue of the party, and also the single most obvious vampire in the history of vampire companions. Seriously, even if I hadn't been pre-spoiled by the internet collectively jizzing itself over him, the dude literally cannot hide it to save his life. He leaves the remains of his meals around for people to find, he idly muses on all the things he can do now that he has the parasite, and the moment the Ger Hunter shows up and starts talking about vampires, he visibly begins to plot his demise. Hunter Boy over there should be fucking fired for not picking up on Astarion's leechy nature. He's supposed to be the fucking expert here. By the time he tries to drink from you and reveals his not actually a secret, my only real response was, oh thank God he finally just said it. I turned him down for the record. He sidled up to me with those puppy dog eyes like, can I have a nibble? And I said, fuck no, you can't have my blood. I'm a sorcerer with baby health who took 3 arrows and a scimitar to the face 2 hours ago. I need every drop I have left. So that just left him to slink off to sulk somewhere else. Gotta be honest, I actually find this part of him incredibly endearing. You'd think someone who's normally so smooth would be better at this. Actually no, I take that back, considering Astarion fucking practices the lines he's going to use on people within earshot of their intended recipients. See, that's the thing about Astarion, and it's probably my favourite thing about him. He's really not as smooth as he thinks he is. It's genuinely funny, but it's also a symptom of a very sad fact about him that I'll get into in a little bit. Astarion is largely defined by his trauma. Don't get me wrong, each of the Origin companions is made who they are by the suffering they've gone through, but Astarion most of all. Only Karlach, who I've said before is essentially a rape survivor, reaches the same level of trauma he's endured, which is actually the reason the two get along so well, despite the fact that they have such wildly different personalities and they both handle their trauma in such vastly different ways. They see themselves in each other, and they both long for a life free from living under the shadow of their abusers. But this is where the two truly differ, because while Karlach is the single most earnest person in the game, and is someone who wants to live as much as she can, Astarion's coping mechanism is to close himself off and use everyone and everything he can find to give himself the edge he needs to kill his abuser and set himself free, no matter what it might cost or who it might hurt. Or at least, that's who he is without you. Long before being your companion, and even before he was the spawn of Khazad-dûr, Astarion the Rogue was simply Astarion Ancunin, a magistrate of Baldur's Gate. Okay, maybe simply is the wrong word to use, but not much is really known about his pre-spawn days, but we do know that he was saved, quote-unquote, from a gang of Ger who nearly beat him to death for a ruling he handed down. And considering the Ger are Baldur's Gate's equivalents to the Romani people, you know what, I'll let you draw your own conclusions here. Khazad-dûr found the dying Astarion and offered to make him his spawn, which Astarion agreed to, saving his life and damning himself to a living hell. Let's be honest, viewer, we all know that Khazad-dûr horribly abused Astarion. He abused all of his spawn, but he seemed to take a special and rare joy in hurting Astarion most of all. And this is because Astarion was defiant. He was intent on being his own person, and this was something that Khazad-dûr could not allow, and so he sought to break Astarion, to shatter his will and crush his pride and make him into the perfect little toy. And he did this through abuse, through physical and mental torture, through starvation and degradation, and through his commandments. And so complete was his control over Astarion that only his abduction and implantation by the forces of the Absolute could offer any form of escape. An escape that would infuriate and bewilder his abuser, but would allow Astarion a glimpse of hope as he found a fleeting freedom and a chance at revenge. Astarion's approval largely revolves around displays of power and cruelty, but he also appreciates the player supporting his independence and autonomy. And of course, anyone who's played the game knows how much he hates it when you're nice. That Astarion disapproves notification is practically a constant fixture in a good aligned player's life. But there is a reason for it. I mean, a reason alongside the fact that he's just a massive bitch. As I said in the Lae'zel video, Astarion is one of the only 2 Origin companions who disapproves of acts of charity. And while I stand by what I said, that he hates acts of charity because he believes it's a form of vulnerability and a way of giving up power and security, there's more to it than that. Astarion simply doesn't like that someone in need would be given help while he was forced to suffer for 200 years without any form of aid. Astarion hates seeing someone else get what he was denied for so long, and this is where we come to the crux of the matter, because in order to really understand Astarion, we need to talk about his abuse and how his trauma shaped him. And this is your final warning if you're uncomfortable with discussions of potentially triggering subject matters, because I'm not going to hold anything back. Skip the next section if you need to, because this is going to get kind of heavy. Everyone still here who wants to be here? Okay then, let's talk trauma. I find Astarion rather interesting because his character development between acts is almost entirely decided by the way you treat him. His personality and motivations largely remain the same, but if you're paying attention, you'll notice a subtle change in his demeanour if you act as his friend, but not as his enabler. But in order to do that, you first need to see past his mask. At the start of the game, Astarion is entirely focused on gathering allies and accruing power. Act 1 is where you'll be on the receiving end of most of his disapproval, as he's still raw from his time with Cazador and doesn't know how to trust anyone. Astarion will do anything to gain power, true, but he'll also do anything to look powerful, to make people believe that the player, and Astarion by association, are just too strong to be worth antagonizing. Astarion cannot afford to display any vulnerability at first, and his intent is on using the player character as a tool to exact his revenge. Act 1 Astarion is fear-motivated and actually displays phenomenally low self-worth, but he hides this behind a mask of confident indifference, sexuality, and cynicism. And while this fear doesn't actually go away until you kill Cazador, the mask does begin to slip once you've spent enough time with him. And I think the first big slip you see, the first big display of vulnerability Astarion will allow you to see, is when he's looking in the mirror.
The only benefit to a mirror when you have my condition, it doesn't quite make up for the lack of a reflection, mind you. Preening in the looking glass? Petty vanity? Of course I miss it. I've never even seen this face. Not since it grew fangs and my eyes turned red. I don't know. I can't remember. My face is just some dark shape in my past. Another thing I've lost.
Despite the indignant start, there's actual desperation here, and it stems from two places. The first of which, despite his words, isn't actually petty vanity, but it comes from anxiety. Astarion is a victim of sexual exploitation, having been forced to sleep with hundreds of people to lure them back to Cazador's lair, to their ultimate demise as far as he knew. But the places he found those people weren't exactly high class. They were dive bars, alleyways, wherever the lonely, inebriated and desperate could be found. Astarion puts a lot of value on his beauty and sexual prowess because it was a tool for survival. It kept Cazador happy, and a happy Cazador was less likely to hurt him. But the constant use and abuse of his looks and the state of the people he lured in also means that he doesn't actually know if he really is still beautiful, or if all of it was simply the low standards of the people he found. And so, unable to find out for himself, he turns to you, seeking comfort. And that's the other place his desperation stems from. Astarion wants kindness. He craves validation, yes, but also, and he'd never admit this, he wants companionship, friendship. He yearns to experience the simplest of kindnesses that were denied to him for so long, and you can give him that.
What? I want to know what the world sees when it looks at me. What you see. Excuse me, I'm an eternally young vampire, not your doting grandmother. You can do better. What else? Very good. Now just tell me I'm beautiful and we can call it a day.
I think this is why he actually appreciates it if you tease him a little bit.
How dare you? I thought we had something special. Still, you're nice too. I better get some beauty sleep. It seems I need it if I'm to catch up with the competition.
This isn't just Astarion appreciating your snark, it's a moment of gentle ribbing between friends. And I'll be honest, I actually think this scene, paired with your acceptance of his nature, marks a turning point in his attitude towards you far more than if you allow him to drink your blood or not. See, a huge part of abuse is instilling the notion that things cannot get better, and that you don't deserve better. Someone who doesn't expect better, who's been conditioned into thinking that this is the best things can be, and that they wouldn't deserve it even if it could be, is all the easier to control. And Cazador spent 200 fucking years beating the idea that the world is a cruel and uncaring place into this poor boy, doing his damnedest to ensure Astarion would never dare believe that there could be anything for him that his master didn't provide. This is why Cazador instilled his 4 rules into his spawn. Thou shalt not drink the blood of thinking creatures was used to keep them weak. Thou shalt obey me in all things was used to break their will. Thou shalt not leave my side unless directed was to restrict their freedom. And thou shalt know that thou art mine, the most insidious of the fair, was to kill their hope. Astarion lived under such horrible abuse for so long that he lost his ability to see the good in people, to believe that it could be there. He says as much about the gods even. He doesn't believe in any of them because none of them would help no matter how hard or long he prayed for it. If the all-powerful pantheon of the divine was of absolutely no help, how could he believe in something as simple and fallible as human kindness? And so he turned away from it, hardening himself, or at least believing himself to be hardened to, the suffering of others. He would do anything to survive, no matter how distasteful it was or who it hurt. But everything changes when he meets you. You, the person who gives him a place even after he threatens your life, even after he reveals what he is. The person who sees through his charm and who his lines don't work on, and yet who still sees value in him. Who shows him a kindness he couldn't allow himself to believe existed. You, who promised to protect him from Cazador and ask for nothing in return simply because you care about him. By the start of Act 2, your kindness has had a profound impact on Astarion, though it's relatively easy to miss. He's still scheming for power, still obsessed with revenge, but it's no longer controlling him. He stops rejecting acts of kindness, and he even approves of some of them, especially when it involves freeing those who are under another's control. Astarion even admits, in a roundabout way, to being concerned for his vampiric siblings, now that he's not around to receive the brunt of Cazador's abuse. Since we're not talking about romance in this video, there are 2 events in Act 2 that I think are the most important turning points in Astarion's character arc, and those are found in his interactions with Raphael and with Araj Oblodra. Araj Oblodra is the rather off-putting drow blood potion lady who you probably remember as having a vampire fetish like 90% of the internet after playing this game. What was it that Amelia Tyler said again?
You may know me from such things as lying on the sofa eating cheese for several months.
No, that's not it.
It's the scent of Avernus, new by Calvin Klein.
Fucking no, play the right one.
The world continues to turn while you read everything.
Okay, now you're just taking the piss.
If you fancy Astarion, you might want to consider therapy.
Okay, yes, that one. Hey, Astarion fuckers. This is you. No, I will not apologise.
I was so damaged, I must have him.
Anyway, despite probably seeming like an inconsequential scene, it's actually rather important. And to understand why, let's watch it, shall we?
Although perhaps there's one more thing we could discuss. Your friend. He's a vampire, no? Or one of their spawn, at least.
Oh, don't worry. We're all friends under the Absolute. I won't bite.
Oh, I'd prefer if you did. I assume he belongs to you? I'm sure he really believes that. How utterly adorable. Do you have a name, Spawn?
Astarion, but hold on.
Good. Now, Astarion. I've dreamt of being bitten by a vampire since I was a young girl.
I'm sorry, you want to be bitten?
To feel your life's blood slipping away. To dance on the edge between life and death. Yes, I want it. I'll even compensate you. A potion of legendary power that forever increases the strength of the one who consumes it. It's not for sale, but it's yours if you bite me.
I will have to decline.
Excuse me? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and you're squandering it.
I gave you my answer.
Can't you talk some sense into your obstinate charge?
I'm sorry, but could you excuse us a moment? Are you actually asking me to do this? Trading me for some potion? Because there's something wrong with her blood. I can smell it from here. It's rank. I can't say. Drinking it wouldn't kill me, but it would not be pleasant.
I don't have all day, true soul.
God, I hate this bitch. Anyway, what's important about this scene is how she speaks to and about him, as well as how he responds to her. Araj speaks past Astarion at first, assuming him to be your property, only addressing him directly to invoke her desire, and going right back to talking past him the moment he refuses to comply. She doesn't see him as a person, she sees him as property. She sees him the way Cazador sees him, and although there's nothing sexual about the interaction,
Incredible.
Nothing explicitly sexual, I mean. I think it's important to note that her goal is still to use his body for her own pleasure, whether he wants to or not. And the thing is, Astarion stands up for himself here. He turns down the opportunity for an extremely potent potion to defend his own autonomy. And the reason for it is simple. He doesn't want to. He's exercising his right to choose, and he's choosing no. Make no mistake, this is progress. This is Astarion valuing himself over the utility his body can provide, and it's fantastic. But here's the thing, ingrained survival habits are hard to break, and Astarion is still scared that if he somehow fails to be useful to you, you'll abandon him. And that's why 2 of the 3 options here will cause him to bite her anyway. He doesn't want to, but he'll still do it for you. Anything to curb the fear of abandonment.
Fine. I'll do it. Darling, I've had a sudden change of heart.
I felt like shit when I realised what I'd done. In every playthrough after my first, I've refused to even entertain the notion of having him bite the bitch. It'd be way too much. And the thing is, Astarion was very obviously expecting you to force him to anyway.
I don't have all day, true soul.
All right. Thank you. It's still a no, I'm afraid.
How very disappointing.
Thank you. I appreciated that.
The genuine surprise in his voice, not just the first time, but when he's thanking you? I find it genuinely heartbreaking that he fully expected you to command him to do it. But I can't say it's unexpected. Astarion is so used to being used that even now, he automatically assumes that he will be, and that his own feelings ultimately mean nothing. And that's because he's been used for his body for so long that he struggles with even considering that he shouldn't be.
The way she leered at me. The blood merchant. I can't get it out of my head. It isn't like me. Not like me at all. I was being too precious, wasn't I? We could have used her potion. A moment of unpleasantry doesn't matter if there's a fine reward. I should have just gritted my teeth as always and let her have me for a bit.
There's something darkly ironic about how a lot of fans of the game see Astarion, because they look at him and all they see is a sexy vampire that can be the bad boy of their dreams, and so they treat him that way, both in and out of game. But in doing this, they are unwittingly putting themselves into Cazador's role, using Astarion for their own pleasure and ignoring what he wants or needs.
There's nothing more desirable in the world than a vampire, is there? And when you've been through all I have, you damn well are going to fight with what few assets the gods give you. But a part of me feels sick when I think about getting on my back for breadcrumbs again.
There is a reason that Astarion says he hasn't enjoyed sex for a very long time, you know. And it's not because his partners weren't skilled, and it's the exact same reason he admits that there was a time that he would have loved the ability to make anyone who touched him burst into flames. The thing about Astarion that you have to realise is that, aside from his sex appeal, the biggest survival tactic he has is being useful. He needs to feel needed, to be indispensable, because it means he won't be thrown aside. And while this takes the form of sexual favors, it can be for anything, so long as you have need of him. I think it's actually incredibly fitting that Astarion is a rogue, because after a cleric, a rogue is the class that you most want in your party, because they have so many uses. Especially in this fucking game, where there's a new trap or locked something every 10 fucking feet. Hey, person in charge of placing the traps in this game? Who are you, and how flammable is your head?
I just want to talk.
But by standing with Astarion against Araj, you help him realize one very important thing.
I don't need to. It isn't worth the scars anymore.
Anyway, we move on from the bitch to a brief aside about the drama horror. Raphael is the second important character in Act 2 because it's thanks to him that Astarion learns what Cazador has in store for him, the ritual of vampire sentence. And Raphael makes you work for the information, relishing in forcing you to do his dirty work. But once you get it done and he tells you, well, let's just say that this is where Astarion begins to fall back into old habits. Because once we get to Act 3, the imminent confrontation with Cazador looms large, and all of Astarion's worst habits come back with a vengeance. I'm going to tell you something that I predict some people aren't going to like. Astarion isn't innocent. Well, yeah, Raiden, he's a neutral evil character. Oh no, that's not it. I'm saying Astarion isn't innocent of the crimes he committed whilst following Cazador's orders. I'll give you a moment to replace that popped monocle before I explain, and I'd also like to ask you to watch through to the end before you leave that angry comment. See, people have a tendency to conflate victimhood with innocence. They think that in order for someone to be a victim, they have to be innocent, and that a bad person can't be a victim because a bad person deserves what happens to them. This is used in real life to excuse mistreating people you don't like, but it's also used a lot in fandom to try to excuse people's problematic faves of any wrongdoing by pointing to their traumatic backstory and saying, see, that's why they did it. It wasn't their fault. It was all that mean person who pushed them into it. No, really. It's the whole hurt people mentality, but instead of being used to demonize an abuse victim, it's used to justify anything your favorite character does. And this becomes especially noxious when people do it to themselves. I've met plenty of people, some of whom I once called friends, who genuinely believed that the fact that they were hurt by others meant they could not be responsible for the pain they caused to anyone else with their shitty behaviour. And the thing is, being hurt by others doesn't justify the pain you cause, just as I was only following orders doesn't actually morally absolve you of your deeds. And this is where we get into Astarion, because as much as both he and a lot of players would love to absolve him of all wrongdoing because of what Cazador put him through, you just can't do that. The narrative doesn't allow you to, and Astarion can't even do it himself. Though that's not to say he doesn't try. Like I said, Astarion begins falling back into bad habits once you return to Baldur's Gate, and his anxiety about facing Cazador heightens. He starts disapproving of charity again, he starts hiding behind deceptions and scrabbling for power, but most of all, he begins to lie to himself. Or at least, he tries to. See, Astarion has one goal now: take control of Cazador's ritual and become the vampire ascendant himself. And that means sacrificing his siblings and the soul of every one of his conquests for the sake of his own power. And try as he might to justify it, he just can't. And the first inkling we get of this is in the Gur camp. Ulma confronts Astarion with his own actions. He stole away their children and handed them over to Cazador, damning them in the process. And when she demands he bring them back, all he can do is meekly reply with,
You don't know Cazador like I do. He's merciless. You want me to march into the lion's den and save your children? But I promise you, they're already dead.
I want you to pay attention to how he responds to the conversation, because I think it's very telling.
I spent 200 years bringing him victims. Each and every one was whisked away to be fed on that night.
But you never saw him feed yourself. He could keep prisoners for days before killing them.
I know our plight is grim, but if there is even a chance to save them, we must take it.
If our children are truly gone, then we ask for blood. I know you can understand that, Spawn.
I suppose. Yes. Yes. Revenge, I can do.
Thank you. From me and all my people. If you can do this, we will be in your debt. You have lived a life of violence and sin. You have stolen lives, broken families, and caused immeasurable grief. Doing this will not right those wrongs.
If you're trying to encourage me, you're failing abysmally.
But it will be a start. You may still be redeemed.
As flippant as he is with this, Astarion's clearly bothered by what Alma says. And not because she calls him out, but because he knows it's true. He's responsible for all the pain he caused. But nothing ever comes close to breaking through this posturing like Sebastian does. Sar Palace is a darkly depressing romp of misery and depression that reinforces just how fucking obsessed with Astarion Cazador truly is. But it doesn't get truly upsetting until you get down to the secret spawn dungeon and the depths of Cazador's cruelty and the extent of Astarion's own crimes are truly brought to light.
You. I know you. You're the one from the tavern. You smiled and joked and got me drunk.
No. You're dead.
You called me so many sweet things. My name sounded like a lyric on your tongue.
Sebastian,
You remember me.
you were handsome. Shy. You'd never been kissed.
You taught me how. And then you destroyed me.
It can't be. It's not just him. I know so many of these faces. They're my conquests. I pursued them, seduced them, and brought them to Cazador. He told us he was feeding on them, but he turned them to spawn. He turned every last one, so we'd have souls for this cursed ritual.
How long?
What?
How long have I been down here?
170 years. You were one of my first.
Astarion's guilt could not be more obvious here, and it speaks to a simple truth. He may have only done it to survive Cazador, but he is still responsible for hurting each and every person that he ever lured back. Cazador may have ordered it, but Astarion is ultimately the one who doomed them all. The grim truth that most people don't want to admit is that no matter your intentions, no matter if it was accidental or on the orders of someone else, if you hurt someone, you are still responsible for the pain you caused. And as far as all of these people are concerned, they are just as much Astarion's victims as they are Cazador's. And despite his desire to deflect the blame, to distance himself from the spawn in the cages, he can't do it. And let's be clear, he desperately wants to. He cannot stand to associate himself with them because accepting the thought that he's just like them is the one step too far that will keep him from completing the ritual.
What's the point? They're as good as dead. I thought they were dead. If they are unleashed, they will cause incredible carnage. They will be ravenous. They must die. Better they serve a purpose. It should be. I don't want to be like them. They're pathetic. Horrible. That weakness in me is dead. It's dead! I have a higher purpose.
It's tragic, but it's ultimately true. The only difference between the Spawn in the cage and Astarion, and this is a parallel he himself draws later, is that he was taken away from Cazador's influence, and they were left to rot in a dungeon. Speaking of the bastard, let's take a look at Cazador when Astarion finally does return.
Who stands before us? Is this truly our prodigal son? Do not slouch before me, boy. Have you no respect for yourself? Look at you, crawling back after abandoning your family. You should be begging our forgiveness. Have you fallen so far that this speaks for you?
I don't need anyone to speak for me.
No, you always had a gift for words. I fondly remember your empty boasting, your tired jokes, your endless prattle.
No! Shut up!
Do the cattle not know you, boy? Have they not seen your fits of temper?
You son of a bitch.
You truly forgot my power. You truly thought our bond as creator and creation was all that stopped you from killing me? Oh, you are weak, my child. You are a small, pathetic little boy who never amounted to anything. But today, you will finally do something worthwhile. You will burn, and I will ascend.
No! Stop him! Get me out of this!
Witness the birth of the Vampire Ascendant! Ecce Dominus!
Cazador is an interesting character, I think, because aside from his status as one of the absolute worst abusers in the history of the series, the man is entirely defined by his obsession with Astarion. Really think about it. Cazador has spent more time and attention on Astarion than on any other Spawn he has, to the point where he's practically willing to sacrifice all the rest just to get Astarion back. The devotion he's had to making Astarion miserable and breaking his will borders on the fanatical, and that obsession has only grown following Astarion's escape and subsequent return to the city. Of fucking course it's grown, because Astarion has not only escaped, but he's seemingly gained everything Cazador desires. He can walk in the sunlight, he can enter homes uninvited and cross running water and eat garlic cheese bread and all those other things that a normal vampire can't do. And Cazador has no idea how he can do it, which just has to drive him insane. Keep in mind, Cazador doesn't know about the parasite. He doesn't know about its bullshit plot convenience powers, so to him, Astarion must seem like a god amongst leeches. And he cannot abide that, because he spent 200 fucking years grinding the poor boy down and instilling his inherent worthlessness into him, and now Astarion can just do anything he wants? Cazador, like most abusers, is obsessed with control and power dynamics. He doesn't just want Astarion to feel helpless, he needs to prove he's better than him. He's defined himself by the power he holds over others, and yet Astarion, his favourite toy and the recipient of the absolute worst he can muster, is able to not only defy him, but to do everything he can't. No, this cannot stand. This is why he immediately tries to break Astarion down, to reinstill that fear and trauma that he meticulously carved into Astarion's very being. Along with the actual scars. And he knows exactly how to provoke Astarion, how to get under his skin and drive him to the brink of suicidal rage, all to prove his superiority, all to trap Astarion one last time, to hurt him one last time. And also to make the fight extra annoying, which I honestly just do not have the fucking time or patience for. So... Much better. Down you go, bitch. And with Khazad-dûr down, we come to the final big controversy of Astarion's quest.
No healing sleep for you. Wake up!
Get your hands off me, worm!
I'm not the one in the dirt. One last thrust, and I'll be free of you. I'll never have to fear you again. But if I finish the ritual you started, I'll never have to fear anyone. Ever.
I'm just going to cut to the chase here. Astarion should not become the vampire ascendant. And I've seen people debate this back and forth, but setting aside the people who just have a really weird fetish for unhealthy power dynamics in relationships, the best argument I've seen anyone make in favour of ascending, and while I say the best argument, it's still not a good one, is that Astarion cries when he kills Khazad-dûr without using the ritual, and that means you made him sad. This is fucking stupid. Astarion isn't crying because he's sad that he can't ascend, he's crying because he's emotionally overwhelmed and he's allowing himself to display that for the first time, because he's actually free now. He doesn't have to fear his abuser coming for him ever again, and all that emotion has to come out somehow. Astarion's desire to complete the ritual, hell, his thirst for power in general, always stemmed from his fear of Khazad-dûr. As I said way earlier in the video, everything he did was to gain the power he needs to take revenge and to keep himself safe from his abuser, and he was never going to be truly free from Khazad-dûr's influence until he rid himself of the man in question, as well as the power he had over him, and by ascending, he would do little more than become another Khazad-dûr, all in a misguided attempt to never allow himself to become a victim again. The ritual was just another form of running away, and it was never going to make him happy. The good ending for Astarion is abandoning the ritual because he proves himself better than his abuser could ever be. But it also means he's forced to take responsibilities for his actions, and it starts with,
Is it over? Is he?
Jesus, lady, put this away before you put someone's eye out. Where was I? Oh, right. Yes, so there's still the matter of the 7,000 spawn, and I can't speak for you, but I chose to kill them. And I honestly can't say if that was the right choice, but it's the choice we made, and it's the one we have to live with. But it's the choice I prefer, largely because it's what leads to this.
You killed not only Khazad-dûr, but also his wretched creations. I expected less.
So I can see from all your heavily armed friends. You didn't think I could resist completing the ritual, did you?
I admit, I had my doubts. But where are our children? What of their fate?
I don't know for sure, but Khazad-dûr turned everyone we brought him. I can only assume that included your children.
So when you destroyed the spawn, you killed them too?
They died long before we arrived. Trust me. They were not the children you knew.
Perhaps. But the choice should still have been ours.
I have I've stolen because anything else would mean sending you down into the dark. It means showing you the hunger in your babe's eyes and leaving you with that terrible final decision. I visited enough pain on your people. The least I could do was spare you that.
Perhaps there was something to that. A kindness I would not have credited you with.
Well, that's backhanded as compliments come, though I'll take it if it means you're done trying to kill me.
I never dreamt a spawn could find redemption. But, yes, you will never be hunted again.
I think this moment, despite being utterly heartbreaking, is honestly quite beautiful. It demonstrates Astarion's newfound willingness to take responsibility and live with his choices, which is, as he says, the downside to free will.
We could have tried. We could have given them the same chance I had. I was able to go out into the world and make better choices, to go against my nature and become more than a blood-sucking monster. Maybe they would have done the same. Or maybe not, but did we have the right to take that choice away from them? I suppose that's the less convenient side of freedom, having to live with the choices you made.
Sorry about the audio hiccups there, my computer was bugging a bit while I was recording that. This is, I think, Astarion at his best. It's an Astarion who has made peace with who he is, with who he's chosen to be. It's Astarion as a man truly on the path to recovery, and a man prepared to face the future. Because he never completed the ritual, the destruction of the Netherbrain leaves Astarion a normal vampire again, complete with all the vulnerabilities inherent to his undead state. But 6 months later, when you meet him at Withers' party, he's happy. Despite everything, he's happy. Because now he's truly free. Free from Cazador, free from the parasites, free from hunters. His future is his to decide. And for the first time in a very long time, he's free to choose who he'll be. And it's thanks to you, his savior, his companion, his almost victim, his friend. The person who saw everything he could be and gave him what he needed to achieve it. Astarion is finally enough. And that, I think, is the greatest gift that anyone could ever give him. Thank you for watching, and a huge thanks to my patrons for this support. I honestly didn't expect this video to be so long, but I ended up having way more to say on our toothy friend than I initially thought I would. For a character I just did not like at all when we first met, I've grown remarkably fond of the little leech, and I wanted to make sure to do him justice, especially since he's the favourite of so many of my friends. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe and all that, and I'll see you in the new year. Take care of yourselves. Bye.